She stood at the edge of the docking bay as alarms rolled through the metal halls like slow thunder. She was the alien daughter promised to be brave and cold. Crew called her Talia in human speech so the sound could fit their tongue. Westalia kept her chin high and her eyes on the blue field beyond the shield, Gatesh told herself. She would not bend before this world of iron and glass, told herself. She would trust no human then. The power dipped and the shield hissed and a soft dusk fell. Across the bay in the dark hum, Talia slipped away. Like a quiet star sliding behind a cloud, one saw the path her feet chosen not, the engineer's snout. The sentries near the lift knot, the cameras that blinked and went gray when the power cut again across. The station, a small team, moved with steady steps. Claire led them with calm eyes and a steady breath. Claire wore the badge of a human guard, but carried herself like a kind sister who kept the peace at home when storms came hard. With her walked Megan, the medic with swift hands. Lee kept the coms live with old tricks and spare fuses. Nora checked vents and listened to the metal like a reader of Windsnown, of them wished for glory. One of the people's Sophia call came from the council deck, where the alien queen waited with a quiet rage that felt like a winter scythe. Queen spoke without heat, yet the air grew thin. Daughter is gone, the queen said in a steady tone that shook the hall in silence. Find her and return her unharmed. Claire bowed her head and answered with a vow, said like a simple promise she would make to a neighbor in need. We'll bring her back. Began with the easy places and found nothing. Checked the quiet gardens where the station grew herbs for tea and balm. Walked the narrow ring that looked down on the gas giant like a soft lamp hung in a night. Searched the cargo maze where boxes made small streets and small shadow snow. Talia kept eyes on the thin trail of power drops and said the pattern was not random like footsteps. Megan said while she patched a broken panel. 2 light their way. Nora touched the wall and heard a faint tremble beneath the skin of the stations. Something moved in the service ducts like a small heart beating in a big chest. Claire listened and felt a tug in her chest that told her to walk the old corridor near the storm shelter. She did not know why she trusted the tug the way a sailor trusts the pull of Tidith. Corridor was charred from an old fire put out last month. Air smelled like metal and rain, even though there was no rain up here. On the floor lay a small ribbon of fabric. Talia wore a sash at her belt, woven in colors that looked like a rising sun. Claire picked up the ribbon and held it up in the dim light. This is hers. She sadly worked fast at a panel and coaxed a small eye of light to life. Map showed heat in the old storm shelter. Megan nodded and shouldered her kit. Nara took point with a soft step and a steady hand. They moved like a single breath down the last stretch and found the door sealed from the inside. Claire did not kick it, sat down beside it and spoke in a low voice that carried warmth. Talia, if you can hear me, you are safe with us. Was no answer yet. The air on the other side shifted like someone holding back a sub. Claire leaned her head against the door and told a story in simple words to the metal and the sea launche. Spoke of her little sister June, who hid in a closet when storms knocked the power out in their old house in Kansas. Spoke of the way she sat on the floor outside that door and told June about the morning light that always comes back after night. Said she would wait here as long as needed. She said no one would force the door inside the shelter. Talia pressed her palm to the seam and felt the warmth of that voice through the metal. She had been raised to read fear and strength in the space between. This voice did not push. This voice made a small home in the dark, and Wadage opened the lock with a slow breath and stepped back. Door slid aside with a sigh like a tired friend. Easing into a chair. Claire did not jump up, stayed on the floor where the girl could see her hands, and her ice. Megan kept a pace behind with open palms. Lee held the light but turned it down so it did not sting. Ra watched the hall with ears sharp as a fox at Disclea. Stood in the doorway with her shoulders tight, and her chin high. Her eyes were bright and fierce like the edge of a storm. Claire spoke softly and told her. Namesh said her team was here to walk her back to the queen. Said there was no rush, and no one would touch her without her. Talia did not move, glanced at the dark corners, as if they held. Huntress. Claire took off her jacket and set it on the floor between them like a small bridge told. Talia that the storm shelter had been rebuilt after a fire, and the lights still failed, and the main grid dippage said she also grew quiet when the power died because it woke. Old Memoria Stalia looked at the jacket, and then at Clarin, the girl. The fire began to ebb. Like a tide turning in a long baish asked in a low voice why the lights failed again, and again Claire said the grid was old, and the storm outside the big window pulled at the lines like a tide on a dock. Rapesh said they were fixing it together here. And Nosh did not blame any. Onedalia stepped forward one slow step, and then another, stopped at the edge of the jacket bridge and sat down with her back to the door. Claire stayed where she was and watched the slow breath move in and out of the girl like the sea megan, brought a thermal blanket and set it down. With an easy reach, Lee slipped a small lantern onto the floor and made its light soft as Donora spoke over, comes in a whisper so the queen would found her, and she is Sephithi. Queen did not answer at one scene the council deck. The queen stood with her hands folded and her eyes closed. Like a mountain in cloud wind, she spoke. Her words were simple. Bring her when she is ready in the shelter. Talia leaned sideways, and the tension in her arms bled away. She had run because the walls of the station felt like a net, and the eyes of the council felt like chains, even when they were only ice. Fear had clawed at her and told her to disappear. Both the quiet of this group felt different from orders in glass. Claire sat a little closer and left a small space still between them, like a doorway only the girl could choose. Ish began to tell another story. Spoke of a river near her town, and how it rose in spring, and how the people stack sandbags, shoulder to shoulder, not to win a medal, but to keep their neighbors safe. Humans do this, she said. We show up and we stay until the water goes down, or not perfect, and we make mistakes, and we fix them together. Stand watch at night, and we trade shifts, and we bring each other soup. Talia listened and felt a new shape inside her chest that did not have a name, and her mother, Tungesh, leaned further and then lay down without meaning to, as the blanket became warm and the lantern light became a soft short outside. The old grid shuddered and then steadied somewhere. Lily laughed under her breath because a bypass finally held. Megan wrote a note with calm details and kind words to remind the future what happened in this Hornera, checked the corridor again, and felt the danger pass like a big animal choosing another path. In the woods, Claire stayed with the girl, and her eyes grew heavy as the station hummed a calmer song. When Talia drifted close to sleep, she shifted and slid until her shoulder found the side of the human guard. Claire did not move. Awaish let the girl curl up like a child who had outrun a long night. She kept her arms still and offered steady warmth like a small campfire held in careful hand. Snow once Bokeith's silence in the shelter was not empty. It was full of breath and trust. Time passed in the way time does when a heart that had been a fist begins to open on the council deck. The queen waited and learned patience in a new way. It taught armies to stand on. She let her daughter rest by a foreign guard in a small room at the edge of a storm. After a while, Talia woke and sat up and rubbed at her eyes, like any young person who had slept in the wrong place for the right reason. She looked at Claire, and then at the door, and then at the lantern. She said she was ready to walk back. Claire Rosen did not offer a hand because the girl did not ask for one. She folded the jacket and slung it over her arm and nodded. Mogan lifted her kit. Lily clipped the lantern to her belt. Nora took the lead. 5 of them moved down the corridor like a small family going home after a hard day. Wordless people stepped as a sum touched because of rank, but because they saw something they wished to protect in their own Livison. The deck. The queen stood tall and older than iron, but the lines of her face softened at the Satalia. Did not bow in fear. She walked to her mother and touched her sleeve, and then stepped back to stand beside Claire. The queen saw the choice and the space and the trust. She turned to Claire and spoke with a voice that had crossed many winter Sioux. Brought my child back safe, she said. Claire answered with the same plain grace she had kept all day. She said the child found her own way back, and that the team only held the light. Queen looked at the humans gathered. Theirs had come to this station with hard reasons and harder plans. She thought she would test them and find them wanting instead. She found a kind of strength that did not roar. She found watchfulness and patience, and hands that built small bridges untired. Florsh said the treaty talks could begin without the old sharp edges. Said they would eat together first because food makes honest ground. In the mess hall, the cooks put out simple bowls and warm bread and a pot of stew that smelled like a welcome after rain. People took seats where space opened and no one kept a chair like a throne.